Malik Carter had not even had time to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth when the white police officer leaned down and slapped him again in the middle of the courtroom. Malik's hands were still cuffed. The judge kept his eyes on the case file. The prosecutor remained silent. The badge-wearing officers surrounding them stood motionless, as though watching a black child being beaten in front of them were nothing more than routine procedure. But what would happen when the bully realized that the boy he had just humiliated was not alone? Malik did not cry or struggle. He simply looked the officer straight in the eye and said, "You just turned this into a federal case." The officer laughed, convinced it was nothing more than the desperate threat of a child about to be convicted. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A woman in a black coat stepped inside, her icy gaze locking onto the blood on Malik's face. And in that moment, no one in the room knew that the badge she was about to place on the table had the power to bring down an entire system that had survived for far too long on silence. The first sound Malik Carter heard inside the Kingsbury County courtroom was not the judge's voice but the dry scrape of metal against wood as the chain between his handcuffs dragged across the defense table. His split-lip, bruised wrists and careful breathing were treated like background details less important than the polished badge of Officer Cole Mercer standing across the aisle. Prosecutor Eliza Mathers rose. She called Malik dangerous, aggressive, and unpredictable. According to her, the 16-year-old had attacked Mercer at Kingsbury Central Station and tried to interfere with a lawful arrest. She did not mention the swelling beneath Malik's ribs. She did not ask how a boy in handcuffs had collected more injuries than two armed officers. Malik kept his back straight. "I recorded him pushing an old black veteran to the ground," he said. "That is what happened." Mathers looked at him as though truth from his mouth required special permission. The phone containing this alleged recording was damaged while in police custody. "Convenient," Malik replied. His public defender, Riley Tran, stood before Judge Roland Keene and requested permission to show footage. The video had captured Malik raising his phone, Mercer turning, and the officer moving first. Keene watched 10 seconds before lifting one hand. "This recording has not been verified by the proper authorities." Riley's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, the proper authorities are the people accused of destroying the original." A murmur moved through the courtroom, then died beneath Keene's stare. "Counselor, control your tone." Mercer smiled. It was not relief, it was recognition. He had tested the room and found every door unlocked. He crossed the aisle without asking permission and stopped beside Malik. "Open the phone," he said. "Use the backup password." "No." Mercer leaned closer, letting contempt sharpen each word. "Outside, you can point that little camera wherever you want. In this room, I decide what gets called the truth." Malik turned his head slowly. Fear pressed against his chest, but he refused to feed it. "No. You only decide which lie gets stamped." Mercer struck him. The slap cracked through the courtroom. Malik's cheek snapped sideways. The taste of blood spread across his tongue. Keene lowered his eyes to the papers before him. Mathers did not move. The security officers remained still, as if obedience to power mattered more than the law they wore on their uniforms. Malik faced Mercer again. A thin line of blood darkened the corner of his mouth. "You just made this a federal case." Mercer laughed softly. "You think someone is going to walk through that door and save you?" The courtroom doors opened. A woman in a dark coat stepped inside. Naomi Carter saw the blood on her son's face, the officer standing too close, the judge pretending not to notice, and the prosecutor watching with cold satisfaction. Malik waited for her to rush forward. He waited for anger, for outrage, for proof that this time she had come as his mother. Naomi did none of those things. She studied the room, noted where Mercer stood, where Mathers had placed her files, and how quickly Keene avoided her gaze. Then she walked to the last row and sat down. Something inside Malik sank. The slap had humiliated him, but her distance cut deeper. Mercer noticed it too, and his smile widened. Naomi remained silent. Only her eyes moved. They dropped to the evidence bag on the clerk's table, then to the seal pressed across its opening. Her expression did not change, but her fingers paused against the face of her watch. The seal had been replaced. By the time Eliza Mathers asked the court to admit the new evidence, the room had already chosen its version of Malik Carter. She understood that. Cole Mercer understood it better. All they needed now was an object sharp enough to turn prejudice into procedure. A uniformed officer carried a sealed evidence bag to the front. Inside lay a folding knife with a black handle. Mathers held it up between two fingers, careful not to touch the plastic more than necessary. "Recovered from the defendant's backpack," she said. This supports the state's position that Mr. Carter arrived armed and prepared to attack Officer Mercer. Malik stared at the knife. I have never seen that before. Mercer gave him a thin smile. Of course you haven't. Boys like you only recognize evidence after it ruins them. Riley Tran rose at once. Objection. The state has not established a reliable chain of custody. Mathers turned toward him with practiced contempt. Counsel is confusing discomfort with irregularity. No, Riley said. I am reading the form. He stepped closer to the clerk's table and pointed to the signature beneath the transfer record. The name did not belong to the evidence room employee listed above it. The handwriting matched the officer who had seized Malik's belongings. That signature is Mercer's, Riley said. He handled the backpack, signed it into storage, and now appears as the complaining witness. He controlled the evidence before and after the alleged discovery. Judge Roland Keene barely looked up. An administrative error does not alter the nature of the evidence. Riley's voice remained measured, but the words cut cleanly. When the error always protects the same man, it stops being administrative. A few people shifted in their seats. Keene struck the bench with his gavel. Enough. The knife will be admitted provisionally. The ruling admitted more than steel. It gave Mathers the weapon needed to recast a witness as a predator. Mathers seized the ruling before the sound faded. She requested that Malik be held without bail and transferred for prosecution as an adult. She described the knife as proof of intent, the bruises on Mercer's report as proof of violence, and Malik's refusal to unlock his phone as proof of consciousness of guilt. Every sentence polished the same lie until it sounded official. Malik listened without interrupting. Mercer watched him closely, waiting for anger. That was the point of the slap. Malik now understood. It had not been a loss of control. It had been bait. If Malik shouted, lunged, or even raised his voice, Mercer would call it confirmation. So Malik gave him nothing. During the recess, Riley was allowed several minutes with him in a glass-walled corridor. Naomi stood on the other side, near enough to see, too distant to touch. Malik told Riley about the questions at the station. Mercer kept asking what Elias gave me, he said. Not why I recorded him, not why I stepped in. He wanted to know if Elias passed me something. Riley's expression changed. That does not fit the charge. No, it fits a search. Naomi approached when the guard allowed it. Her voice was low. Do not react to what they want you to react to. Malik looked at her through the glass. Did you come here to teach me how to stay calm, or did you come here to be my mother? For the first time, Naomi had no precise answer. The silence between them was brief, but it carried years. After she stepped away, Riley opened his legal folder just enough for Malik to see another file hidden beneath the court papers. It contained names, dates, arrest reports, and photographs. I have been tracking Mercer's cases for months, Riley said. I have been pretending to be less prepared than I am because someone has been watching me. Malik studied him. How many cases? Enough to know this is not an accident. Before Riley could explain further, the guard ordered Malik back inside. His belongings were placed on the table for inspection. Books, notebooks, a torn charger, and the backpack were pushed toward him. Malik ran his fingers along the inner seam. Something hard had been stitched beneath the lining. The courtroom had already decided what Malik carried. Now Malik had to decide who could be trusted with what it had failed to find. He waited until Mercer turned toward Mathers, then slipped 2 fingers beneath the torn seam of his backpack and freed a memory card no larger than a fingernail. For 1 second, he considered handing it to Riley. Then he saw Mercer watching through the reflection in the glass door. Malik closed his fist. Riley noticed. He said nothing until they were taken into the attorney conference room, a narrow space with 1 table, 2 chairs, and walls painted the color of old paper. When the guard stepped outside, Riley placed his hidden file on the table. 13, he said. Malik looked at the folders. 13. What 13 black teenagers arrested by Mercer in 3 years? Different streets, different charges, same machinery. Riley opened the first file. 17-year-old Darius Cole had been stopped for allegedly matching a robbery suspect. Mercer's body camera failed. A bag of pills appeared after the second search of Darius's jacket. Mathers prosecuted him. Keene rejected a store video showing another officer placing something near the evidence bag. Darius accepted a plea to avoid 10 years. He left school before graduation. The second file belonged to Jamal Price, 15. He had been accused of reaching for Mercer's weapon. No witness saw it. The body camera recording ended 31 seconds before the alleged attack. A metal baton was logged hours later. Jamal refused a plea, was sent to juvenile detention, and died after being beaten by other inmates. The official report called it an altercation. Malik's face hardened, and nobody connected them. People connected them, Riley said. They just did not have enough money, access, or power to make the connection matter. He moved through the remaining files without turning them into a list. Cameras failed. Evidence arrived late. Reports used the same phrases: aggressive posture, sudden movement, fear for officer safety. Mathers signed the charges. Keene rejected civilian footage. Terrified children pleaded guilty because innocence offered no protection against a sentence designed to crush them. Malik opened his hand and showed Riley the card. Riley inhaled sharply. "We send this to federal investigators now." "No, this may contain the proof we need, and this room may contain ears." Riley stared at him. Malik pointed toward the door, then the ceiling vent. "Mercer knew Elias gave me something before anyone searched the bag. He knew what questions to ask. Someone has been listening since the station." Riley crouched beside the table. At first he found only gum dust and a loose cable. Then Malik noticed a dark circle beneath the metal. Support too clean to belong there. Riley reached under and pulled free a small recording device. The blood drained from his face. "This is a protected attorney room," he whispered. "Protected by whom?" Malik asked. The door opened. Helen Brooks stepped inside, carrying a stack of court forms. The older clerk glanced at the device in Riley's hand and did not look surprised. She closed the door, crossed the room, and took it from him. "I have seen this model under 3 other tables," she said. "I was waiting to learn which person in this building still had enough courage to force someone to explain them." Riley stood slowly. "Why did you never report it?" Helen's hand trembled, but her voice did not. "Because 6 years ago my grandson was charged with assaulting an officer. He was innocent. I knew the report had been altered and I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job. He took a plea because he could not survive another month in detention." She placed several copied logs beside Riley's files. Dates had been changed. Evidence entries had been edited. Signatures appeared after hearings had ended. "I kept records," Helen said. "Silence was my failure. Forgetting would have been another." Malik slid the memory card across the table. Helen studied the tiny symbol stamped on its edge. Her expression tightened. "I know this mark," she said. It was the old logo of Sentinel Meridian, the company controlling every public camera throughout the entire city of Kingsbury. The discovery changed the shape of Malik's case. A planted knife could destroy one life, but a memory card linked to the company controlling Kingsbury's cameras suggested something built to watch thousands. Riley locked the conference room door. Helen covered the device's lens with a legal pad, and Malik finally told them what had happened at the station before Mercer put him in handcuffs. Elias Grant had not looked helpless when Mercer stopped him. He had looked tired, alert, and prepared to resist without giving the officer an excuse to strike. The military coat was old, but the posture beneath it remained disciplined. Mercer demanded identification, searched his bag, and accused him of loitering. Elias answered every question. That only made Mercer angrier. "You people always think calm makes you innocent," Mercer had said. "Sometimes it only makes you easier to process." Elias did not raise his voice. "And sometimes a badge only makes a coward expensive." That was when Mercer shoved him against the station wall. Malik had lifted his phone because nobody else moved. Through the screen he saw Mercer tear the bag from Elias's shoulder and order him to kneel. Elias glanced toward the platform clock, not toward the officer. The look was brief but deliberate, as though he was measuring how much time remained before someone expected him elsewhere. Now Helen explained why. Elias Grant was a decorated veteran and the former chief systems engineer of Sentinel Meridian. He had helped design the network that connected traffic cameras, transit feeds, municipal buildings, and facial recognition software. He resigned after discovering the company had expanded far beyond its public contract. The system was not only tracking suspects, it was cataloging teachers, activists, civil rights lawyers, families who filed complaints against police, and residents who attended meetings in black neighborhoods. The information had been copied, sorted, and prepared for sale. Not criminals alone, but entire communities had been converted into profitable suspicion. Elias had taken part of the archive before leaving. He was supposed to meet a federal investigator near Kingsbury Central. Mercer's job was to stop him before the exchange happened. Malik had not interrupted a routine arrest. He had walked into a hunt for evidence. Riley examined the card through an offline reader. If Elias knew Mercer was coming, why give this to a teenager? He did not choose me, Malik said. He chose the only person still recording. The memory returned with sharper edges. After Mercer knocked the phone away, Elias had reached for Malik's fallen backpack. His hand disappeared beneath the torn flap for only a second before another officer seized it. Malik had assumed the old man was trying to help. In truth, Elias had understood that keeping the card meant losing it. Riley opened the directory, but most of the contents were encrypted. Only one file responded. It contained dates, location codes, and arrest identifiers. Several matched the cases in Riley's folders. Then Malik saw his own name. The entry had been created 11 days before the station incident. For the first time, silence in the room did not feel imposed. It felt like impact. "That is impossible," Riley said. "No," Malik answered. "It means the station was not where this started." Months earlier, Malik had written a short article for his school journalism club about the unusual concentration of surveillance cameras in South Kingsbury. He had compared city maps, counted devices, and asked why blocks with fewer public services had more digital observation. The article received little attention. His teacher praised it. Most students scrolled past it. Sentinel Meridian had not. A tag beside Malik's name identified him as a media risk subject. His address, school schedule, and usual route home had been logged. Mercer had noticed him before Elias ever stepped onto the platform. Malik stared at the screen. "They marked me for asking why we were being watched," Helen answered quietly. "Systems like this do not fear crimes. They fear questions they cannot control." Riley attempted to copy the visible file. A warning appeared, followed by a new line of code. Malik read it once, then again. Access confirmed. Central server purge initiated. Below it, a timer began counting backward from 6 hours. 6 hours was not enough time to fight a system built to erase itself, but it was enough for fear to expose the people protecting it. When the hearing resumed, Mercer returned with the confidence of a man who believed every clock belonged to him. He paused beside Malik and glanced toward the back row, where Naomi remained seated. "Your mother watched me, put you in your place," he murmured. "That must hurt more than the slap." Malik lifted his eyes. "You keep talking because silence would force you to hear yourself." Mercer's smile tightened. Before he could answer, Naomi rose. She stepped into the aisle, carried a black document case forward, and placed it on the clerk's table. The room shifted around her, not because she raised her voice, but because she no longer needed permission to be noticed. "My name is Naomi Carter," she said. "I am a counterintelligence analysis officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, assigned as an intelligence liaison to a Department of Justice task force investigating the unlawful transfer of American surveillance data to foreign entities." Mercer's face lost color for 1 second. Naomi opened the case and removed a federal preservation order. This order requires the immediate protection of Malik Carter's phone. Officer Mercer's body camera records all Sentinel Meridian servers connected to Kingsbury, every related case file, and the electronic records maintained by this courthouse. Mathers rose immediately. Her voice carried the polished cruelty of someone accustomed to disguising panic as procedure. "How convenient," she said. "A powerful mother arrives, announces a classified title, and suddenly her son's criminal case becomes a national emergency." Naomi looked at her, without blinking. "The order was signed by a federal judge before I entered this room." "This is intimidation," Mathers snapped. "You are using your office to interfere with a local prosecution." "I am not asking you to trust a mother," Naomi replied. "I am requiring you to obey a federal judge." Judge Keene leaned forward. "The CIA has no domestic law enforcement authority in my courtroom." "That is correct," Naomi said. "I am not placing anyone under arrest. I am serving a preservation order through the task force. Your duty is to prevent destruction, not debate jurisdiction until the evidence disappears." Keene's mouth hardened. "This court will review the document before taking action. The central server is already purging data. Then your agency should have acted sooner." The insult was precise, but Naomi accepted it without flinching. Malik saw something pass across her face, not shame but recognition. She had heard that accusation before, perhaps from herself. Mathers noticed the hesitation and attacked it. "How involved were you in creating this surveillance program, Officer Carter?" Naomi turned toward Malik before answering. "Years ago, I wrote an analysis recommending expanded camera coverage in cities facing coordinated threats. Kingsbury used that report to justify part of its network. The room seemed to narrow. I did not authorize racial targeting," Naomi continued. I did not approve private data sales, but my work helped create the framework they exploited. Malik's anger did not erupt. It settled into something heavier. You did not put the knife in my backpack, he said, but you helped them build the room where they could hide it. Naomi did not defend herself. Yes, that single word struck harder than an excuse. Riley checked the time. Less than 5 hours remained. He urged the clerk to secure the systems, but Keene ordered everyone to wait until his chambers completed a review. Mercer stood near the evidence table pretending calm, while his hand repeatedly touched the radio at his belt. Mathers requested that Naomi be removed for conflict of interest. Keene agreed and ordered security to escort her beyond the bar. Naomi closed the document case. "Every minute you delay is now part of the record," Keene replied coldly. "In this room I decide what belongs in the record." Malik looked at Mercer. The officer was no longer smiling. A warning appeared on the courtroom administrator's monitor. Riley stepped closer as the clerk read the message aloud. Someone with high-level access was deleting every file connected to Mercer. The account name displayed on the screen was Helen Brooks. The accusation spread faster than the deletion itself. Within seconds, Helen Brooks was no longer the quiet clerk who had spent years recording altered files. She was the convenient traitor standing between the court and its innocence. Judge Keene ordered 2 officers to detain her for questioning while Eliza Mathers stepped forward with the satisfaction of someone who had found a scapegoat before anyone could examine the crime. "There it is," Mathers said. "The insider, the woman who tampered with records, planted doubt, and handed protected information to a defendant." Helen did not move. Her hands trembled at her sides, but her voice remained steady. "My password is known to 3 people, me, the system administrator, and Judge Keene's chief assistant." Keene's face tightened. "That accusation is reckless." "It is not an accusation," Naomi said from beyond the bar. "It is a list of access points. Check the login history." Keene turned toward her. "You have already interfered enough. Then prove her wrong." The room went silent again, but this time the silence did not protect Mercer. It pressed against Keene. He ordered the officers to take Helen's identification card and refused Naomi's request to inspect the system logs, claiming that internal security procedures could not be exposed in open court. Mathers smiled without warmth. "How unfortunate, Miss. Brooks demands transparency only after her own account begins destroying evidence." Malik watched the administrator's screen. The deletion times appeared beside the files, each marked to the second. He looked toward Helen, then toward Riley. "She was with us," Malik said. Mathers glanced at him. "The defendant is not qualified to interpret network activity." "He does not need to be," Riley replied. The first deletion began while Helen was inside the attorney room. "There are witnesses, a guard log, and hallway cameras." Keene struck the bench. "This court will determine what is relevant." Malik met his stare. "Relevant is whatever you cannot erase fast enough." Mercer shifted near the wall. For the first time, his confidence looked rehearsed. He avoided Helen's eyes and kept one hand close to his radio. Helen inhaled slowly. "Before I entered that room, I activated mandatory archival retention." Riley turned toward her. "You created a backup." "I created a legal obligation," she answered. "The primary files can be deleted from the courthouse server, but copies are being transferred to an independent archive outside this building." The backup had not been improvised for Malik. Helen had spent months building it, waiting for a public case large enough that the truth could not disappear quietly. Malik understood then that trusting her was not faith. It was recognition of preparation, courage, and real cost. Keene stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. "You had no authority to do that." Helen looked at him. "I had a duty to preserve evidence after receiving a federal order." "You are a clerk. And you are a judge," she said. "Titles do not erase responsibility." The officers hesitated. Mathers demanded Helen be removed immediately, calling her conduct sabotage. Naomi asked again for the authentication logs. Keene refused now, claiming that revealing them could compromise courthouse security. Each explanation contradicted the one before it. Malik saw the pattern. Keene was no longer pretending to protect procedure. He was protecting time. The transfer bar moved across the administrator's screen. 62%, 71, 84. Helen removed a folded card from her sleeve and handed it to Riley. "Final access code. Do not enter it until the archive confirms completion." Her fingers shook badly enough to rattle the paper. Her voice did not. "I stayed silent long enough to keep my job," she said. "I will not stay silent again to keep this chair." Mathers leaned close. "You will lose more than a chair." Helen met her gaze. That threat belongs in the archive too. The bar reached 100%. Riley entered the code. The archive opened with financial records, modified case files, and a list of payments routed through shell companies connected to Sentinel Meridian. Dates, account numbers, and recipients filled the screen. Then one name appeared above all the others. Eliza Mathers had received her first payment before she ever became a prosecutor. By morning, the truth inside the courthouse had already been buried beneath a cleaner, sharper lie. Mercer released a shortened video to local stations beginning at the moment Malik stepped quickly toward him and ending before anyone could see Elias Grant being shoved to the ground. The missing seconds did the work of a weapon. On television, Malik became the attacker, Mercer became the threatened officer, and violence became whatever the editor left on screen. The anchors called Malik a troubled teenager with a history of defiance. No one produced that history. Commentators questioned why he had been at the station, why he had recorded police, and why his grandmother had not taught him to obey. One host leaned toward the camera and said children who respect authority rarely end up in handcuffs. Mercer watched the segment from the precinct and smiled. Outside the courthouse, he gave reporters a statement prepared with Mathers. "This is not about race," he said. "It is about a dangerous young man whose powerful mother is trying to intimidate everyone who holds him accountable." Naomi was removed from the Joint Task Force before noon because of her relationship to Malik. Mercer used the decision as proof that the investigation had been corrupt from the beginning. Mathers appeared on another broadcast and described Naomi's preservation order as a political ambush disguised as maternal concern. At Ruth Carter's house, every television was turned off. Malik sat at the kitchen table while his grandmother placed his phone face down beside him. "You do not need to read strangers deciding who you are," Ruth said. "They are not deciding," Malik answered. "They are being told." Ruth sat across from him. She spoke about Malik's father, who had been stopped by police so often that he kept both hands visible even when reaching for his own registration. He had taught Malik to be calmer, cleaner, quieter, and more polite than anyone should have to be. "He wanted you to survive," Ruth said. Malik looked toward Naomi, who stood near the window without her agency credentials. "If I have to be perfect before I deserve not to be beaten, then the problem was never me." Naomi lowered her eyes. "No, it was not." Outside, Kingsbury divided itself into camps. Protesters carried signs demanding Malik's release. Across the street, Mercer's supporters waved police flags and called every question an attack on law enforcement. Television vans fed on the conflict. The louder the city became, the less anyone discussed the missing footage. Riley arrived with a plea offer. If Malik admitted to obstructing an officer, Mathers would withdraw the weapons charge and recommend a reduced sentence. "They want a conviction they can repeat on television," Riley said. "This could keep you out of adult court." Malik read the document. "And what happens to the 13 cases? Nothing, immediately." "What happens to Mercer? Nothing immediately." Malik placed the offer back on the table. "Then it is not mercy. It is payment for my silence." The archived records made Mathers' role clear. She had not simply accepted money. She had designed the strategy. Juvenile prosecutions were inflated, plea agreements were counted as proof of rising crime, and those statistics were used to justify larger contracts for Sentinel Meridian. Mercer supplied frightened children and violent reports. Mathers converted them into numbers, policy, and profit. Mercer was the fist. Mathers was the person who invoiced the bruise. That evening, Malik told Riley he wanted the entire station video played at a public hearing, not a summary. Not selected frames. Every second. They built their case by cutting the truth, he said. Make them face it without edits. Riley warned him that Mathers would attack his character, his family, and every mistake he had ever made. Malik stood. "Then she can do it, while the whole city watches." Before Riley could answer, Naomi's secure phone rang. She listened without speaking, and the color drained from her face. Elias Grant had disappeared from witness protection. A federal agent had been found unconscious near the safe room. On the floor beside the open door, investigators found a trail of blood. No one yet knew whether Elias himself had left it behind. The city reacted to Elias Grant's disappearance exactly as Mercer hoped. Before federal investigators could confirm what had happened, he told reporters that the missing witness had exposed himself as a criminal running from justice. His tone was calm, almost amused, as if blood on a safe room floor were nothing more than another useful headline. Malik understood the message. If Elias could vanish under federal protection, then nobody connected to the case was beyond reach. That afternoon, officials announced that Malik would be moved to another juvenile facility for his safety. Riley objected, but the transport order carried enough stamps to look legitimate. 2 officers placed Malik in the rear compartment of an unmarked van and told him the route would remain confidential. For the first 15 minutes, they followed the road toward the county center. Then the driver turned south. Malik watched landmarks pass through the reinforced window. The courthouse district disappeared. So did the hospital signs. The van crossed beneath an overpass leading toward the industrial edge of Kingsbury. "This is not the route," Malik said. The officer beside him did not answer. He reached across, seized Malik's wrist, and searched beneath his sleeve. "Where is the card?" Malik kept his breathing even. "Already copied." The officer's expression sharpened. "That was not the question. It is the only answer that matters." The man drove his forearm against Malik's throat and forced him back against the metal wall. A violent detainee attacks during transport. Officers respond. Tragic accident. People believe reports like that every day. Malik did not waste strength fighting the pressure. He watched the officer's shoulders, counted each breath, and waited for the grip to shift. Naomi had once taught him that panic gave an attacker control twice, first over the body, then over time. Malik needed time more than force. He let his knees weaken. The officer adjusted his hold, confident that fear had taken over. Malik twisted his left wrist, enough to press the hidden emergency switch on the watch Naomi had given him years earlier. Across town, Riley was still studying the transfer documents. The authorization line contained no valid signature. The facility listed on the order had never approved Malik's arrival. He called Naomi. "The transfer is false." Naomi had already been removed from the task force, but removal did not erase what she knew. She sent the vehicle number, route records, and emergency signal to the Federal Tactical Unit without attaching her name. The van reached the final road before the city boundary, when black vehicles closed in from both directions. The driver slammed the brakes. The officer released Malik and reached for his weapon, but commands struck the van from outside before he could draw it. The doors opened. Federal agents pulled both officers out and found Malik on the floor, conscious, injured, and still watching. He had survived because he refused to give panic the final decision over his own body. At the hospital, doctors examined the bruising around his neck. Naomi stood beside the bed holding an apology she had probably rehearsed. Malik stopped her. "Do not promise this will never happen again. You cannot promise that." Her face tightened. "I need you to stop hiding things from me," he continued. "Not as an officer, as my mother." Naomi sat down. She told him everything she was permitted to reveal about the task force, the foreign buyers, the compromised officials, and the reason Sentinel had marked Elias and Malik. She did not soften her mistakes or ask him to forgive them. Meanwhile, agents searched the transport officer's phone. They found repeated calls from Mercer, instructions about the route, and messages demanding the memory card. The records also exposed Mercer's larger ambition. He had staged arrests, provoked confrontations, and inflated crime reports to build his reputation as Kingsbury's defender. He was preparing to run for sheriff. Prejudice had never been only hatred to him. It was campaign strategy. One intercepted call contained Mercer's voice. "Grant is gone," he said. "The kid will not live long enough to reach court." A second voice answered, lower and controlled. "Do not call me again, Officer Mercer." The voice belonged to Judge Roland Keene. By the time the public hearing began, Kingsbury's courtroom no longer felt like a place where authority would decide Malik Carter's future. It felt like a sealed chamber waiting to discover which side of the law had been lying longest. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the walls. Malik entered with bruises still visible around his neck and refused to cover them. Eliza Mathers rose before Riley could speak. "The state moves to exclude any reference to the transport incident. It has no bearing on the original charges." Judge Keene answered too quickly. "Granted." Riley stood. "Then perhaps the court would prefer the call records connecting Officer Mercer to the man who tried to kill my client." Mathers turned with a thin smile. "A dramatic claim is not authenticated evidence." Riley placed the records on the screen. Mercer's calls to the transport officer appeared in sequence, followed by route instructions and demands for the memory card. Keene leaned forward. "Source federal seizure," Riley said. Keene lifted his gavel. "Until proper custody is established, this court will disregard." The doors opened. Helen Brooks entered beside an inspector from the Federal Oversight Office. Her hands were steady now, The records were preserved through the independent archive I activated under the federal order. Every transfer carries a verified timestamp checksum and access history. Mather's smile disappeared. The inspector confirmed the chain of custody. Riley pressed a key, and the full station video began. No edits, no missing seconds, no obedient narration to tell the room what to believe. Mercer blocked Elias Grant without legal cause. He tore the bag from the veteran's shoulder. He shoved him against the wall. Malik raised his phone and did nothing more. Mercer crossed the platform, seized him by the throat, and drove him to the ground. Then another officer opened Malik's backpack and slipped the folding knife beneath the lining. A sound moved through the courtroom, not surprise but shame arriving too late. Riley continued. Financial records linked Sentinel Meridian to shell companies. Those companies paid Mercer, funded Mathers through concealed transfers, and routed campaign money toward Keene. Altered files followed. Deleted footage. Rewritten reports. Calls arranging arrests before alleged crimes had occurred. Mathers stepped away from the prosecution table. Officer Mercer acted outside any lawful instruction. The state was misled. Mercer stared at her. You wrote the charges. I relied on information you provided. You built the whole system. Keene struck the bench. Both of you will remain silent. The doors opened again. Elias Grant entered with federal agents. Mercer's face collapsed. Elias had not been successfully abducted. The blood in the safe room belonged to an agent injured while stopping the break-in. Federal officials had announced Elias's disappearance to make Mercer panic. It worked. He called the transport officer, then Keene. That final conversation provided the probable cause needed for arrest warrants. An agent stepped forward. Cole Mercer, Eliza Mathers, and Roland Keene, you are under arrest. Mathers immediately pointed at Mercer. Keene demanded immunity. Mercer looked from one to the other and understood that the people who had profited from his violence were preparing to bury him beneath it. He moved before the agents reached him. Mercer lunged toward a security officer, tore the sidearm from its holster, and dragged Malik against his chest. The barrel rose beside Malik's face. You all needed a white villain, Mercer shouted, so this boy could become your hero. Malik did not struggle. No, we only needed you to stop lying long enough for everyone to see what you are. Mercer shifted his grip to aim at Naomi. Malik lowered his weight exactly as she had taught him, turned beneath the changing arm, and broke free. Federal agents struck Mercer from both sides and drove him to the floor. His face hit the same tiles where Malik had stood bleeding. The handcuffs closed around Mercer's wrists. As officers led Keene away, the judge looked back. You think arresting a few people can change an entire system? Malik did not answer at once. He turned toward the row where 13 families of Mercer's former victims were sitting. 13 stories waited there, no longer isolated, no longer easy to bury. Justice did not arrive as a single verdict. It came in documents, reopened files, public hearings, and names finally spoken without shame. Mercer was charged with assaulting a minor unlawful arrest, planting evidence, threatening witnesses, obstructing justice, contract fraud, and participating in the illegal sale of surveillance data. Mathers faced charges for falsifying records, prosecuting people she knew were innocent, destroying evidence, accepting bribes, and conspiring to block a federal investigation. Keene was suspended, then indicted for financial misconduct, abuse of judicial power, evidence destruction, concealing violence, and coordinating threats against witnesses. The 13 old cases were reopened. Families who had been dismissed as angry, confused, or dishonest were invited into a public chamber and allowed to tell the whole story. Some spoke through tears. Others spoke with anger sharpened by years of being ignored. Their children did not become innocent because the city finally listened. They had always been innocent. What changed was that the people who had profited from silence could no longer control the record. Sentinel Meridian lost its city contract. Kingsbury created independent oversight for public camera systems, removed direct police control over stored footage, and required legal counsel before minors could be questioned. The reforms did not repair every life already damaged, but they changed the conditions that had allowed the damage to repeat. Yet no reform erased the years stolen from those 13 children. One had died, several had lost school, and every family carried damage no settlement could price. Accountability mattered because it stopped the machine. It did not pretend the machine had never crushed anyone beneath its weight. Riley Tran represented the families in a civil rights class action. Helen Brooks resigned from the courthouse and became a coordinator at a new whistleblower protection center. Elias Grant testified before Congress about how surveillance technology could turn racial bias into an automated system, one that watched certain communities more closely and then used its own unequal data to justify even more watching. Naomi was invited back to the task force. She accepted a different assignment, one that required less time away from home. She did not abandon her career. She changed what responsibility meant. Malik did not forgive her in one conversation, and she did not ask him to. They began again through difficult meals, honest questions, and apologies without excuses. Schools, universities, and national organizations invited Malik to speak. Reporters called him the boy saved by his CIA mother. He rejected the phrase, every time. At the final public hearing, Malik stood before officials, cameras, and the families who had waited years to be believed. "My mother entered that courtroom with a badge," he said. "Most children who are beaten do not have a mother like mine. If you only stop abusing people after learning their family has power, that is not justice. That is fear of being caught." The room remained silent, but it was no longer the silence that had protected Mercer. It was the silence of people forced to listen. Malik refused offers that would turn him into a polished symbol. He returned to school and built a student network that taught witnesses how to store videos, safely verify dates, preserve original files, and connect families with lawyers. He understood now that a recording alone did not create justice. Evidence had to survive long enough to reach someone who could not be bought. Months later, Malik returned to Kingsbury Central Station. Near the platform, an officer was shouting at a black homeless man. A teenager stood nearby with his phone raised, but his hand shook so badly that the image blurred. Malik stepped beside him. "Keep recording." The boy swallowed. "What if they arrest both of us?" Malik opened his own camera and pointed it toward the officer. "Then, they will have to explain why two cameras recorded the same lie." Another passenger lifted a phone, then another. No one attacked the officer. No one shouted. No one tried to become a hero. They simply refused to look away. Mercer had once used handcuffs to turn Malik into a criminal before the facts could speak. In the end, those same cuffs closed around Mercer's wrists while the truth remained free. Malik's victory was never about having a powerful mother walk through the courtroom doors. It was about refusing to let a badge rewrite the truth, refusing to let fear isolate a victim, and proving that silence is the strongest shield an unjust system can possess. Mercer believed power meant controlling the evidence, humiliating the innocent, and deciding whose voice deserved to be heard. But in the end, every lie he stamped into the record became another link in the chain around his own wrists. So tell us in the comments, would you have kept recording if you knew speaking up could make you the next target? If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who believes truth must be protected, and subscribe to the Courtroom channel for more powerful stories where courage finally forces injustice into the light.